The air in the research pod was warm and still. Jay wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He was a man who liked quiet places. This swampy moon, Xylo 7, was perfect for him. His job was to study the plants. He would take samples, note their colors, and test their properties. It was slow, peaceful work. Outside, the jungle was loud. Strange animals clicked and whistled in the thick purple fog. Giant glowing mushrooms lit the paths. Jay preferred the silence of his pod. He was alone, and that was how he wanted it. Being around other people often led to trouble. Here there were only plants. He was looking at a small blue leaf under a light when the world turned white. A flash of silent, bright light filled the sky. It was gone as fast as it came. A few seconds later, a deep boom shook the ground. The whole pod rattled. Jay's tools fell off the table. He ran to the window. A trail of smoke cut across the green sky. Something had crashed. Something big. It was not far away, maybe 2 or 3 kilometers to the east. Jay's first thought was to stay put. His second thought was the person or people inside that ship. This moon was dangerous. The air was thick with tiny spores that could make you see things that were not there. The water was acidic. And the animals. They were fast, with sharp teeth and a hungry look in their eyes. He sighed. He could not just sit here. He had to check. He put on his protective suit. It was a tough gray material that covered him from head to toe. He grabbed his med kit, a knife, and a heavy pulse rifle he hoped he would not have to use. Then he stepped out into the wet, hot air of the jungle. The journey was difficult. The ground was soft and tried to suck his boots down. Twisted vines hung from the trees, grabbing at his arms. He could hear things moving in the fog, but he never saw them clearly. He moved quickly and quietly, just like he had been taught a long time ago in another life. Soon he saw the crash site. It was a long, deep scar in the jungle. Trees were smashed into splinters. The ground was burned black. And there, at the end of the scar, was the ship. It was like nothing he had ever seen. It did not look like it was built from metal. It looked like it was grown. Its surface was a smooth, pearly white like a seashell. Parts of it were shaped like the petals of a flower, now broken and bent. It was beautiful even in its destruction. Jay moved closer, his rifle ready. The main part of the ship was torn open. He could see inside. The light from within was a soft, gentle blue. He climbed carefully over the broken pieces. Inside it was worse. The walls, which seemed to be made of living wood, were cracked and oozing a dark fluid. He saw bodies. They were tall, slender beings. They had 2 arms and 2 legs, but their skin had a faint glow and it looked hard like insect shell. Their faces were peaceful, but they were clearly dead. There were no wounds from the crash. Instead, he saw deep cuts and bites. The local fauna had found them first. His heart felt heavy. He was too late. He was about to turn back when he heard a sound, a soft, pained click. It came from the front of the ship. He moved toward the sound, stepping over debris. In what must have been the control room, a support beam had fallen from the ceiling, and underneath it, pinned to the floor, was another one of the aliens. This one was different. Her armor was more intricate, with patterns of gold and deep blue. A long silken cloak, now torn and dirty, was wrapped around her. She was struggling weakly, trying to push the heavy beam off her leg. Her multifaceted eyes, which shone like dark jewels, looked up at him. They were full of pain, but also a fierce, proud intelligence. She was a leader, a queen. She saw his rifle and her body went still. She expected death. She closed her eyes, ready for it. Jay did not shoot. He slowly, carefully placed his rifle on the floor. He held his empty hands up, showing her he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she could not understand the words, but hoping she would understand the tone. "I'm here to help." He moved closer. She watched him, her eyes wide with fear and suspicion. He looked at the beam pinning her. It was too heavy for him to lift alone. He looked around the room. He saw a broken console and some snapped cables. An idea formed in his mind. He pointed to the beam, then to himself, and made a lifting motion. He then pointed to a long, strong-looking piece of broken support rod nearby. He mimed using it as a lever. The alien queen watched him, her head tilted. After a moment, she gave a slow, slight nod. She understood. Jay got to work. He used the broken support rod, wedging it under the beam. He put all his weight on it. The beam groaned and lifted just an inch. It was enough. He looked at her and gestured for her to pull her leg out. She gritted her teeth, her face a mask of pain, and pulled. Her leg was free. It was badly hurt. The chitinous armor was cracked, and a soft, glowing fluid, her blood, was seeping out. The beam crashed back down as Jay let go of the lever. He knelt beside her. He opened his medkit. She flinched when he brought out a spray canister. "This will help with the pain," he said, his voice calm and steady. He sprayed a numbing agent on the wound. She gasped, but then her body relaxed a little. The pain had lessened. He then took out a bandage roll and a small device that sealed wounds with a soft light. He worked quickly and carefully, cleaning the area and wrapping the leg to stabilize it. He was gentle. He had done this before for humans. The principles were the same the whole time she watched him. The fear in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by a deep, profound confusion. This was not how things were supposed to happen. An alien species should be a threat. It should try to capture or kill her. It should not kneel in the wreckage of her ship and tend to her wounds with such quiet focus. When he was done, he looked at her. "Can you walk?" he asked, knowing she would not understand. He stood up and offered her his hand. She looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took it. Her hand had 3 long, slender fingers. Her skin was cool and smooth like stone. He helped her to her feet, letting her lean on him. She was tall, almost as tall as he was. She tried to put weight on her injured leg and winced, a sharp hiss escaping her lips. "It's all right," Jay said. "Lean on me." He supported her as they slowly made their way out of the broken ship. The journey back to his pod was long and hard. He had to be her crutch. He had to stop often so she could rest. Every strange sound from the jungle made him tense, his hand going to the knife on his belt. But they made it. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in colors of orange and violet, his small gray research pod came into view. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He helped her inside and onto his small cot. She sank into it, exhausted. The pod was simple, a bed, a table, some scientific equipment, but to her it was a strange and wonderful sanctuary. Jay took off his helmet and suit. He was just a man now. He had kind, tired eyes and black hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. He got a container of water and offered it to her. She looked at it, then at him. He took a small sip first to show her it was safe. She took it and drank, her movements graceful even in her weariness. Outside, the wind began to howl. A storm was coming. The thick toxic spores would soon be blowing everywhere. They were safe inside the sealed pod. Jay sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. The alien queen lay on his cot watching him. The only sounds were the hum of the pod systems and the growing roar of the storm outside. They were 2 beings from different worlds, trapped together by chance. He had saved her life. Now they had to wait out the night. The storm raged outside, a constant low roar that made the walls of the pod hum. The wind whipped through the jungle, shaking the trees and hurling thick, poisonous spores against the reinforced windows. Inside, the air was clean but thick with silence. The alien queen lay on the small cot. Her name was Kayla. In her mind, she repeated her title, an anchor to a world that felt very far away. She was the heart of the Zelosian hive, the center of a million thoughts and songs. Here there was only silence. The quiet in the pod was a physical weight on her chest. She was used to the constant, gentle hum of her people's minds, a soft chorus that was always with her. This emptiness was louder than any storm. She watched the human, Jay. He moved around the small space with a quiet efficiency. He was not like the warriors of her own kind who moved with sharp, precise gestures. His movements were fluid, calm. He checked a reading on a screen, made a note on a data pad, and then warmed something in a small heater. He brought over a cup. It was a dark brown liquid that steamed. He held it out to her. Kayla looked at it with suspicion. Her body was built to process the nectar of Xylosian bloom trees, not alien concoctions. Jay seemed to understand. He took a small sip from the cup himself. He did not wince or fall. He simply stood there holding the cup, his expression patient. Slowly, she reached out and took it. Her long, cool fingers wrapped around the warm metal. She brought it to her lips and took a tiny taste. The flavor was bitter and deep, unlike anything she had ever known. It was not unpleasant. It felt warm inside her. She took another longer sip. "Coffee," Jay said, pointing to the cup. He then pointed to himself. "Jay." He was trying to communicate. Kayla understood the concept of names. She pointed a slender finger at him. "Jay." Her voice was a soft, melodic click, unlike the rough sounds of his language. He smiled. It was a small thing, but it changed his whole face. His eyes, which had seemed so tired, now had a light in them. She then placed a hand on her own chest. Kayla. It was the first time she had offered her personal name, not her title, to anyone outside her hive. Kayla, he repeated, the word sounding strange and beautiful in his mouth. This was the start. Jay found an old datapad and pulled up a basic translation program. It was meant for cataloging plant names, not for deep conversation. But it was a start. He would show it a picture of a cup, and the pad would display the Xylosian symbol for vessel. He showed it a picture of a star, and it showed their symbol for light. It was slow. It was frustrating at times, but they kept at it. Jay pointed to his own eyes, then to hers. The datapad showed a symbol. See? He said. Kayla looked at the symbol, then back at him. She understood. She pointed to her own head, then gently reached out and touched his temple. The datapad had no symbol for this. She projected a feeling into his mind, not words, but a simple concept. A question. Here, think. Jay flinched for a second, his eyes widening. The feeling was like a soft breeze inside his skull. He had never felt anything like it. He shook his head, a little stunned. No, he said softly. I can't hear like that. It's quiet in here. He tapped his own head. Kayla pulled her hand back, a profound sadness in her eyes. To be so alone in one's own mind was a concept she could barely grasp. Her entire life was a shared experience. His life was a solitary one. The bravery it must take to live like that was immense. The night wore on. The storm continued its assault on the pod, but inside, a fragile bridge was being built. Jay showed her more of his world. He played music from a small speaker. It was a simple melody with a guitar. The sound was so different from the complex layered harmonies of Xylosian music. This was one man's feeling turned into sound. Kyla closed her eyes and listened. She could feel the loneliness in the notes, but also a deep, resilient hope. He showed her pictures of Earth on his datapad. Vast blue oceans that crashed against rocky shores, silent, snow-covered mountains that touched the clouds, green forests filled with light and life. My home, he said, the words full of a quiet love. Kayla, in turn, used the datapad and her limited telepathy to show him glimpses of her world, cities that looked like they were grown from crystal, glowing with soft inner light, forests of giant, singing fungi that changed color with the mood of the wind. The great hive citadel, a structure so vast it looked like a mountain range made of polished stone and living vine. Xylos, she said, and the word was a song. They were from two different worlds, but in that small pod they found common ground. They were both in their own ways lonely. She was a queen, surrounded by her people but set apart by her title. She was revered, but she was never just Kayla. He was a man who had run from his past, who found more peace in alien jungles than in crowded human cities. He was not looking at her as a queen, or a prize, or an alien. He was looking at her as Kayla, a person who was hurt and scared and far from home. He checked the bandage on her leg. His touch was careful, gentle. He sprayed more of the numbing agent, his fingers barely brushing her skin. Kayla did not pull away. For the first time in her long life, the touch of another being did not feel like duty or ritual. It felt like kindness. The storm began to die down. The constant roar faded to a low moan and then to silence. The only light came from the soft glow of the pod's instruments and the two small moons that now peeked through the breaking clouds. The translation was too slow for what they wanted to say. The datapad could not convey the feelings that were filling the small space, so they stopped trying to use it. Jay sat on the floor beside the cot. Kayla looked down at him. Her jewel-like eyes were soft. She reached out and her fingers gently brushed against the side of his face. This time, the feeling that flowed into his mind was not a question. It was a thank you. It was a feeling of warmth, of safety, of a connection that went deeper than words. He covered her hand with his own. He did not need telepathy to understand. In that quiet, understanding look, 5 years of loneliness for him and a lifetime of duty for her seemed to melt away. They were just two souls, adrift in the vast, cold galaxy who had found each other. He stood up. He was so close now. She did not look away. Her gaze was steady, accepting. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. She didn't. Her eyes closed, their lips met. It was a strange feeling. Her skin was cool, his was warm. It was clumsy and perfect. It was not a human kiss, nor was it a Zalosian gesture. It was something new, something that belonged only to them in that moment. The night was no longer about being trapped. It was about a choice to be close, to not be alone anymore. The barriers of biology and culture fell away, not with a crash, but with a quiet sigh. The cot was small, but it was enough. The pod was a tiny speck in an infinite universe, but for that one night it contained everything that mattered. It was a deep, cross-species connection. It was two worlds meeting not in war or politics, but in a quiet act of trust and shared loneliness. When they finally fell asleep, her head resting on his shoulder, the silence in the pod was no longer empty. It was peaceful. The first light of the morning suns filtered through the pod's window, painting soft stripes of gold across the floor. Jay was already awake. He had been watching Kayla sleep for a long time. Her face, which usually held the stern composure of a queen, was now relaxed and peaceful. In the quiet light, she just looked like herself. He felt a strange, warm feeling in his chest, a feeling he had not felt in many years. It was hope. He moved carefully, not wanting to wake her. He started a fresh pot of coffee, the familiar routine comforting. For a few precious minutes, he let himself believe in a different future. Maybe he didn't have to disappear again. Maybe he could contact her people, arrange a peaceful meeting. Maybe this connection, this fragile thing they had built in one night, could be the start of something more. The sound shattered the silence. It was a low, deep thrumming, growing louder by the second. It was not the sound of a Zylosian ship. It was the heavy industrial drone of human engines. Jay's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. He ran to the scanner screen. His heart sank. 3 ships, military-grade assault cruisers, were descending towards the moon. Their identification codes flashed on the screen. They were from the company he worked for, but these were not science vessels. These were the corporate security forces, a private army that had close ties to his old life. His past had found him. Memories flashed in his mind. A uniform, a gun in his hand. Missions he wanted to forget. He had left it all behind, changed his name, buried the soldier, and become a botanist. But they never really let you go. He looked from the ships on the screen to Kayla, still sleeping on the cot. His mind raced. If they found her, it would be a disaster. They would not see a person. They would see an asset, a specimen. They would take her, lock her in a lab, and take her apart to learn how she worked. They would use her to gain an advantage over her people. The gentle, intelligent being he had shared the night with would be reduced to a thing to be studied. The warm feeling of hope in his chest turned into a block of ice. There was only one choice. He had to make her leave. He had to make them think she was dead and that he was dead too. It was the only way to protect her. He moved quickly now, his movements sharp with urgency. He knelt by the cot and gently shook her shoulder. "Kayla, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she smiled at him, a soft, private smile. Then she saw the look on his face. The fear in his eyes. "What is wrong?" she asked, her voice heavy with sleep. He didn't have the words. He pulled her up, his grip firm. "You have to go, now." He pointed at the scanner screen, at the menacing shapes of the ships. Bad people, dangerous. She looked at the screen and understood. The fear on his face was real. This was not a drill. This was a threat. He grabbed his gear in her arm, pulling her towards the pod's door. "Come on, there's no time." He half carried her out of the pod and into the damp morning air. The thrumming of the ships was deafening now. They were close. He led her not towards the wreck of her ship, but in a different direction, into a thicker part of the jungle. "Where are we going?" she asked, her injured leg aching with every step. "Your escape pod," he said, pushing a giant leaf out of the way. "I saw it yesterday, near the crash. It was intact. He had scouted the area after he rescued her. He always had a backup plan. It was a habit from his old life." There, nestled in the undergrowth, was a small pearlescent pod. It was shaped like a teardrop. The door was sealed, but it looked undamaged. Jay pressed his hand against a panel on its side. Nothing happened. Kayla reached past him. She placed her palm on the panel. It glowed with a soft blue light, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside was a single seat and a simple control panel. "This will take you home," Jay said, his voice rough. "You need to launch now." She looked from the pod to his face. The confusion and hurt in her eyes were a physical pain to him. "You are not coming?" He shook his head, his throat tight. "I can't. If I come with you, they will follow. They will find your world. It will cause a war." He took a deep breath. "You have to go alone. You have to be safe." Tears looking like liquid crystal welled in her multifaceted eyes. "Jay!" She reached for him. He stepped back, his heart breaking. He could not let her touch him. If she did, he would not have the strength to let her go. "You have to go, please." The sound of the human ships was directly overhead now. The trees were shaking from the force of their engines. He looked at her, trying to memorize her face. "Goodbye, Kayla." He reached out and slammed his hand on the button to close the door. It slid shut, sealing her inside. He saw her through the small window, her hands pressed against the glass, her mouth open in a silent cry. He turned and ran back towards his pod. He had one more thing to do. Inside his research pod, he worked fast. He grabbed a small, sturdy data chip from his console. It contained all the records of his time with Kayla, the audio logs, the translation data, the medical scans. It was the only proof that their night together was real. He shoved it deep into his pocket. Then he set the pod's self-destruct sequence. He typed in the code, his fingers flying over the keyboard. A loud alarm began to blare. A red light flashed. He had 60 seconds. He ran out of the pod and back into the jungle just as the first military transport landed nearby. He hid behind a thick tree trunk and watched. Soldiers in black armor jumped out, their weapons raised. They surrounded his research pod. Then the self-destruct reached zero. There was a bright, silent flash and then a loud boom. His pod exploded into a ball of fire and twisted metal. The shockwave knocked the soldiers off their feet. From his hiding place, Jay watched the smoke rise. To the soldiers, and to anyone who would later investigate, it would look like an accident. A botched experiment. A dead botanist and a vanished alien, both vaporized. He looked up at the sky. A small, bright light was streaking upwards, getting smaller and smaller. It was Kayla's pod heading for the stars, for home. He waited until the light was gone. Then Jay turned and walked deeper into the jungle. He did not look back. He had erased one life to save another. He was a ghost again. The man who had shared a night with an alien queen was gone. Only the soldier remained, disappearing into the shadows. The royal chamber on the Xylosian throne world was a place of immense beauty. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with a soft inner light. The air hummed with the silent songs of the hive, a constant, comforting presence in Kayla's mind. She sat on her throne, a seat grown from the roots of the world tree itself. She was the queen. Her every command was law. Her every need was met. But the song of the hive could not drown out the one quiet, lonely thought that was hers alone. The memory of a human man. For 5 years she had rebuilt her power. She had strengthened her fleets. She had dealt with rivals. She had done everything a queen was supposed to do. But in the quiet moments when the official songs faded, she thought of him. She thought of the taste of bitter coffee. She thought of the sound of a single guitar in a storm. She thought of the gentle touch of his hands on her wounded leg. She thought of his name, Jay. He had vanished in fire, but something in her heart refused to believe he was gone. The connection they had shared in that small pod, even without telepathy, had been too real. It had left a mark on her soul. So she used her power not for the hive but for herself. She sent out her most trusted agents, the Seekers. They were silent, unseen. Their mission was not one of conquest or diplomacy. It was a secret hunt. They were to look for any sign of a human male matching Jay's description. They were to search the fringe worlds, the forgotten colonies, the places where a man might go to disappear. For years there was nothing. Reports came back of countless humans, but none of them were him. Her hope began to feel like a foolish dream. Then one day a seeker returned. It did not speak. It simply projected a data stream directly into Kayla's mind. It was a security recording from a dusty, poor human colony world called Kyrios. The image was grainy, taken from a camera high up on a dirty street. The footage showed a man working in an open hangar bay. He was bent over the engine of an old starship. He was covered in grime and engine grease. His clothes were worn. He looked tired, but then he stood up straight to wipe his brow. He turned his head slightly. It was him. It was Jay. He was older. His face was more lined. His eyes held a deep weariness that had not been there before. But it was him. Her heart, the center of a vast empire, felt like it stopped. He was alive. The feeling that flooded her was not just joy. It was a fierce burning need. She had to see him. She had to know why. Why did he leave? Why did he let her think he was dead? She made a decision in an instant. Protocol and politics did not matter. The hive would have to manage without its queen for a little while. She summoned her personal shuttle and her most loyal royal guards. She gave no explanation. She was the queen. She did not need to explain. They left the glittering citadel and plunged into the cold darkness of space, heading for the remote world of Kyrios. The journey felt like a lifetime. When her ship entered the atmosphere of Kyrios, she saw a world of brown dust and rusted metal. The sky was a dull orange. The air, when she stepped out of her ship, was dry and tasted of metal and fuel. It was the complete opposite of her beautiful, living world. Her guards formed a protective circle around her, their polished armor looking out of place in the grimy spaceport. People stopped and stared. They had never seen beings like the Zalosians. Kayla ignored them. Her entire focus was on the location from the security feed. She walked through the crowded, noisy streets, her long cloak trailing in the dust. She found the hangar. It was exactly as it was in the recording. Dirty, loud, and filled with broken ships. And there he was. He had his back to her. He was under a ship, only his legs visible. He was working on a broken landing gear. He slid out from under the ship on a low cart, his hands black with grease. He stood up and turned to grab a tool, and he saw her. He froze. The wrench he was holding clattered to the concrete floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the hangar. He just stared. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were wide with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and fear. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Kayla took a step forward. Her guards tensed, but she waved them back. This was between them. She stopped a few feet from him. The 5 years fell away. She was no longer just the queen in her chamber. She was also the wounded alien in the pod, and he was the man who had saved her. The air was thick with unspoken words. The noise of the spaceport, the yelling of mechanics, the roar of engines, it all seemed to fade into a distant hum. She looked at him. He was here. He was real. He was alive. And he had been here on this sad, dusty world for who knows how long. He finally found his voice. It was a rough whisper, full of emotion. Kyla, hearing him say her name again after all this time, was like a physical blow. She had found him. The hunt was over. Now she needed answers. The silence in the small apartment was heavier than the noise of the spaceport below. Jay led Kayla inside, his movements slow and stiff. The room was simple. A small table, 2 chairs, a kitchen area, a closed door to what must have been a bedroom. It was clean, but it felt temporary, like a place no one really called home. Kayla stood in the center of the room, her elegant form and glowing skin making the dusty, dim apartment feel even smaller. Her royal guards waited outside the door, a silent, imposing presence. She looked at Jay. The initial shock on his face had been replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He would not meet her eyes. Why? The word came out of her sharp and clear. It was not the voice of a queen demanding a report. It was the voice of a woman who had been left behind. Jay flinched. He ran a hand through his grease-stained hair. The ships, they were military. From my old life. His voice was low. I was a soldier. A long time ago. I left, but they don't forget. If they had found you. He finally looked at her, and the raw fear in his eyes was real. They would have taken you, Kayla. They would have put you in a lab. They would have taken you apart. To learn about you. To use you. He walked to a small cabinet and pulled out a tiny, sturdy data chip. He held it out to her. This is all I saved. The records from my pod, the medical scans, the translation data, our night. It was the only proof I had that it was real. I kept it safe. Kayla took the chip. It felt warm in her hand. He had kept this. He had blown up his life and run, but he had kept this one small piece of their time together. The anger in her heart softened, just a little. It was being replaced by a terrible, aching understanding. He had not left her. He had sacrificed himself to save her. But you let me think you were dead, she whispered, the pain fresh in her voice. For 5 years, I thought you were gone. I had to, he said, his voice breaking. It was the only way to make sure they stopped looking. If they thought we were both dead, you were safe. Your people were safe. He looked down at the floor. I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Kayla. Just then, the bedroom door creaked open a few inches. A small face peeked out. It was a little girl. She had Jay's dark, messy hair and his kind eyes, but her skin had a faint, soft glow, and her eyes, while shaped like his, held a familiar, luminous quality. She looked at Kayla with curiosity, not fear. Jay's posture changed completely. The weary man was gone, replaced by a father. Sumin, he said softly. It's okay, you can come out. The little girl pushed the door open and walked into the room. She was holding a ragged cloth doll. She went straight to Jay and hid behind his legs, peeking out at the beautiful, glowing visitor. Kayla felt the world tilt. She looked from the child to Jay, her mind struggling to understand. The girl was theirs. Jay knelt down, putting an arm around Sumin. Sumin, he said, his voice gentle. This is your mother. This is Kayla. Sumin's eyes widened. She looked up at Kayla with a new, intense wonder. The queen from the stories? She asked, her voice a small, clear bell. Kayla's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in a single moment. She knelt too, bringing herself to the little girl's level. The proud, mighty queen was on her knees on a dusty floor. Yes, Kayla said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out a hand, her long, slender fingers trembling. Sumin, with the fearless trust of a child, reached out and took her mother's hand. A simple, physical connection. Kayla felt a warmth flow through her, a feeling more powerful than any hive song. This was her daughter. Their daughter. Suddenly, a loud, harsh alarm blared from outside. Red lights flashed through the window, painting the room in pulses of emergency light. Jay jumped to his feet and looked out the window. His face went pale. They found me. Outside, military vehicles were surrounding the building. Soldiers in black armor were taking up positions, their weapons pointed at the apartment. A loud, amplified voice echoed through the streets. Jay Kim, you are surrounded. Come out with your hands up, surrender the alien. The human military had tracked Kayla's ship. They had come for both of them, and now they had come for their daughter. Fear gripped Jay. This was his worst nightmare. He looked at Kayla, his eyes full of panic. I can't let them take her, I can't. Kayla stood up. The softness in her eyes was gone. It was replaced by a cold, terrifying fire. She was no longer just the woman from the pod. She was the queen of Xylos. She looked at Sumin, who was now clutching Jay's leg in fear. Then she looked at Jay. They will not touch what is mine. She tapped a small ornate device on her wrist. A holographic screen appeared in the air before her. The face of her chief guard appeared. Your Majesty? The humans threaten my family, Kayla said, her voice as hard as diamond. Bring the fleet. Outside, the human commander was shouting more orders. This is your final warning. We are authorized to use lethal force. Then, the sky changed. The dull orange haze of Kyrios began to darken. A shadow fell over the entire spaceport. People looked up and started to scream. The human soldiers looked up, their weapons wavering. The sky was filled with ships, not human ships. These were Xylosian warships. They were beautiful and terrifying, shaped like giant predatory birds or blooming flowers made of obsidian. They were silent, blocking out the suns. Hundreds of them. The entire Xylosian royal armada hung in the sky above the dusty colony. The human commander's voice over the loudspeaker died in a crackle of static. Kayla walked to the window, Jay and Sumin beside her. She looked down at the tiny, panicking soldiers below. She opened a channel to their command frequency. Her voice, calm and absolute, echoed from every speaker in the spaceport. You threaten what is mine, she said, each word dropping like a stone. You threaten my daughter. Stand down, or I will remove you from this world. On the ground, The human soldiers lowered their weapons. The commander, his face white with fear, gave the order to retreat. The vehicles quickly pulled away, disappearing into the streets. The threat was over. It had taken less than a minute. Kayla turned from the window. The fierce queen was gone again. She looked at Jay, and then at Su-min, who was now smiling, her fear forgotten as she looked at the amazing ships in the sky. Jay looked at Kayla, truly seeing her for the first time since she had found him. He saw the scientist, the warrior, the queen, and the mother. He saw the whole, incredible person. "You are safe now," Kayla said, taking his hand and their daughter's hand. "We are all safe. And we are going home." For the first time in 5 years, Jay believed it. He was not a ghost anymore. He was a father. He was the man the alien queen had loved. And he was finally going home.